Anfield Wrap, and for the first time, and will be for the rest of this season, we are in association with The Athletic. You should know about The Athletic by now, but you're going to find out more and more from us over the next weeks and months in terms of the wider coverage and the brilliant work that they do. You know that James and Simon have been doing brilliant stuff for them so far this season, but more and more on that to come during this show. But we're going to focus in first and foremost on Liverpool versus Sheffield United, or the other way round, and we're going to talk about Salzburg as well. I have Paul Cope, I've got Phil Blundell, and I've got David Lynch to talk through Sheffield United, Liverpool, and it's interesting. Phil stayed over in Sheffield, well, in the South Yorkshire region after the game. Paul watched it from the Sheffield United end, and they therefore have influences from those perspectives, or can say what they thought. And it's fascinating to me. I'll go to David first, actually. I actually think there was a real determination post-match to talk Sheffield United up. Understandably, I thought they played really well. But simultaneously, in the cold light of day, the cold hard facts, Liverpool won the game. Liverpool deserved to win the game. Just because they weren't as fluent as they have been in recent weeks doesn't mean Liverpool weren't the better side.
Yeah, I think Jurgen Klopp after the match said that you could make the argument that Sheffield United would have deserved the point if they got it, because we didn't take our chances. But Liverpool did have the chances, and they were really big chances that they usually take. So yeah, I think it is fair to say I thought Sheffield United really impressive in loads of ways. Absolutely great team, great crowd. They're going to take points off some big sides there, no doubt about it. But Liverpool, it wasn't a smash and grab from Liverpool at all. The chances that they created and the way they defended, particularly, I think they fully deserved the 3 points. And I think it's probably fair that people want to paint it in a way that, Sheffield United probably they deserve to win at least, and all this is because that's. A lot of teams don't really get that close to giving Liverpool a game these days. So that's, it was particularly impressive because it's a newly promoted team. But yeah, I don't think it wasn't a smash and grab from Liverpool.
There was an intensity about it, Paul. You were in their end, and there was an intensity about their support. It was for them, it's worth remembering. It's been some time since they played top flight football. It is the European champions, the side that got 97 points last season. It's the second biggest game they'll have at Bramall Lane this season, possibly the biggest, depending on your point of view. It's also Manchester City going either way for that. And I think it's the first of them as well. And I do think that was in both performance, in atmosphere, in intensity. And because it remains 0-0 for as long as it does, all of that sort of ramps up and everyone gets quite heightened around it.
Yeah, it was from their perspective, and I suppose from ours, it was everything I thought going away to Sheffield United would be, and everything that they would want it to be, I suppose. And it's funny because you said I went with my mate who supports Sheffield United and been mates with him for a long time, so it was nice for us to go to the games. And we obviously talking about it all the way before it and then in it. And there was all. In fact, I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't know how much talk outside of me chatting to my mate who's a Sheffield United fan there was of the overlapping centre backs thing. Is that a thing in your world?
I thought it was a thing because I actually thought that one thing that happened is that we sort of struggled down our right a little bit with O'Connell. There was a lot of times when he found himself either in space or with the ball, sort of not exploiting, but sort of looking like he could exploit Trent. Because I don't think Trent gets a lot of cover, and I'm almost starting to think that we might intentionally try and get teams to attack down our right hand side.
Yeah, potentially.
Because it wasn't as much of a problem over the other side. Like the other one, Basham, I didn't really notice him do a great deal, but it felt like O'Connell was in the game quite a lot.
You see, my theory on that is I think their most important player is the left wing back, Stevens.
Yeah, he's really good.
He's really good, so I think so much goes through him. So I think that one of the reasons why, therefore, the left-sided centre-back...
He's better than Baldock over the other side.
He's markedly better. I don't think it's a bit. I think he's markedly better.
Yeah, and that was the analysis I had pre-game was that there was talk of you're going to get to see the two best left-backs in the world, in the league today. Sheffield United's one isn't quite that good. But I was saying to my mates during and after the game, and to all of them, I did feel like I got to be the. I always reference United, so the great United side of us growing up, but it's because that's my favourite reference point for being in an incredible dominant team. I felt very much like United fans must have felt back then. I used to live with a United fan at one point, and it was. That's what it felt like. I got to be the lad going, you were really good, like you were really good. Like that's the best anyone's played against. So I mean, we still beat you, obviously, but there was even smug, complete, like the best of my smug personality. I'll tell you what, I know,
like the Grand National of smug.
Yeah, it was incredible, and it was one of them where there wasn't much they could say to me, other than all right.
Thanks, mate.
But I was saying even during the game. the overlapping centre-backs thing aside, I thought that was a bit of a red herring, to be honest. It wasn't as grand or dramatic as I was led to believe it was. But their shape, that's the best shape I've seen against us all season, and it nullified a lot of what we do best, in particular for me now, I think.
Now, all three of you were at the game. I wasn't. I had to watch it back home. One of the things I think, and I think it can sometimes be difficult, I'll go back to you, Paul, on it first, difficult for people who are watching on television is understanding the cutting off of passing lanes. That basically, and and the other thing I would say as well, and because I've been to Bramall Lane before, that's Bramall Lane pretty much as its narrowest as well, and it's pretty narrow at the best of times. Yeah. There was very little room, and that's what I was trying to sort of imagine being in the ground. The number of times you saw Liverpool players look up and think, nah, it's just not on. Yeah. And I thought that you saw it over and over again. Is that what it was like in the ground? That every time, say, Henderson, Wijnaldum, Fabinho looked up, it was like, no, I can't get there.
Absolutely. And aside from anything else, it was a numbers thing. Excuse me, because you've got to think, they've got the three centre-halves and then effectively three in midfield against our narrow midfield three and our narrow front three. So you've just got loads of lads. And it's funny when you're analysing football and tactic and stuff, but when you just go, there's just loads of fellas there. Like I've started playing 7-a-side once a week, and there's loads of times you all go to each other. There's just too many lads on this pitch. There's nothing you can do. You get the ball, there's someone right on you. That you turn around, there's no passes, and no matter what level of football you play at, that's a thing. And it's Phil said before we start actually the stats of which areas of the pitch we were playing in. There was loads of that first half where we're just sort of playing ourselves in our own third because it's moving it around lovely like we do, and then it's look up, is there a forward pass? No, not really. And even when there was, Match of the Day highlighted Matip's passes into the final third at the other end of the pitch. But it's funny when you see that, because it's like, yeah, he did that 3 times in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And when he did it, it didn't lead to anything, because the next ball is, I've just been pressed and I've got to come back again. So aside from anything else, and aside from my smug performance during and after the game, their shape was really, really good, and they did do a good job. And it came up with the whole sort of question of, because I was saying to him, you just haven't seen us today. Like, there's only been moments where you've seen how good we are. And there's then that question of, well, did we play badly, or did we play badly because they played well? And I think there was a bit of both of that. I think we looked lethargic and we could have done better. And we did have little spells, especially second half, which I'm guessing we'll come on to. But I think you have to give them credit. And I think, going back to what David said, they're going to give... I'm made up we've won that one, and it's still in the bank for City to go and
do. You know when they're playing City at home, by the way?
No, go on.
Wonderful.
January,
it's a Wednesday night in January. Which is about as bad a time as I can think to possibly go to Sheffield United.
Yeah.
It'll be -2. It'll be dark. It'll be quite loud. It's not when I would want to go.
I think that's really fair. The one thing I would say is that we have that early sort of 3-minute spell where City has scored 4.
That's very true. That is very true. Yeah.
In that way that they go about,
but they'll be freezing then.
They will be freezing. They'll stop, and Sheffield United come back in. It is making it hard. Is the one of the things I think is that you get to see. It's only really second half, Phil, where they carry all the threat that they end up carrying Sheffield United, and that they're doing bits and they're nearly on the end of things. But again, it's down to how you sort of view chances in the end. And watching the game live, when you're absolutely like, you think, God, this could be horrible, and then they begin to get sniffs. You're like, oh no, this is a bad day. When you actually look at that, almost arguably up until when it's 1-0 Liverpool, look at it back, there's not a load in there where you're absolutely thinking, yeah, that's one that they should score. And it's because they're having to work so hard just to keep the shape that they need to keep for when Liverpool get the ball back. And you see that when it breaks towards the end of the first half and Liverpool counter, because they're a bit ragged at that point, they're a little bit tired, they've had to be so disciplined.
It takes so much effort on their part to be as organised as they were for as long as they were, and fair play to them for actually managing to do what they did. I think they're very well coached. I think their players knew where they had to be, and I think that was like conversely. Watching Chelsea last week, I didn't think their players had that in them. They're obviously, Chelsea are a much better set of players. But I was watching Chelsea and I didn't really think that the players knew where they were supposed to be, and that obviously makes it a lot more difficult. Whereas Sheffield United, they knew where they were supposed to be, and then they knew where their teammates were supposed to be. There was a lot of times in the first half when they won the ball sort of nominally on their left, and they were able to just play a quick ball inside and not quite get us turned around, but it opened a little bit of space up in front of them. And if they were ragtag, which they weren't, it wouldn't have been as easy for them to sort of get us turned around that little bit. And they seem to get a little bit the wrong side of Fabinho a couple of times first half without ever actually doing anything. And they were very well organised. It makes it very difficult for us.
It's one where you begin to work through what actually does or doesn't constitute poor, David. And I think that you obviously set your own standards. That's one of the things we've seen. But all the way through the game, I was watching it, I've seen genuinely poor Liverpool sides. I've seen poor Liverpool performances at Bramall Lane. You don't get 3 chances like you get. And there's something else as well where this is the first game, arguably, where you can say the front 3, 2 of the front 3 get really good chances. Mane gets 2, Salah gets 1. They don't take them. And it changes the entire sort of perception of the performance. If Mane takes the first one, the clip ball over the top from Van Dijk, Liverpool go 1-0 up. There's every chance that that's then followed, like it was, for instance, against Burnley, with another one before the break. And we're going away, we're talking about a consummate Liverpool performance rather than what we end up talking about and what everyone's talking about, which is Sheffield United had Liverpool on the ropes.
Yeah, I think it gets massively over, but goals are the moments, aren't they? They completely change how you perceive the game, and everyone tries to avoid that, just talking about what turns out on the scoreboard and that, colouring all your judgments of everything that took place across the 90 minutes. But it's 100% what happened about this game. It's, Liverpool were, they probably weren't at the best. You're happy to concede that, but they had so many good moments of where, they had to get stuck in. The fact that they're even hanging in the moments prior to those chances where they don't really look massively troubled. They're dealing with everything. They look cool, and then you need Sadio Mane to put that one in the top corner, and then the game completely changes. You open them up on the break easily. You don't get, the crowd doesn't get up in the way that, when Sadio Mane blasts that one over, that gives them such a lift, and things like that. I think that's coloured the idea of the performance that sort of Sheffield United were unbelievable and Liverpool were terrible.
There's not actually, when you sort of break it down and break down how the chances come and when they come, there's not actually a huge amount of difference between the performances at Southampton, Burnley and Sheffield United. They're all very, very similar. Yeah. And I think that colours perception. But I think the other thing that colours perception is what our rivals for this thing we're trying to do, who we remain 5 points clear of, tend to do, as we joked earlier on, is ease into 2-goal leads quite early and then play the scrappier football as the game wears on. Liverpool have tended to be, if not under the cosh, which they were against Southampton, I'd say, but in the other two, not necessarily particularly effective for much of the first half an hour of the game, looking to wear the opponent down. And then as the game goes on, Liverpool grows stronger and stronger.
This is a massive part of Guardiola's tactics as well, and why City are so dominant in the way they are. They take so much of the risk of away games out of the equation by just having the ball all the time. So they'll never get any encouragement, the opposition, because City have the ball all the time. Now, okay, Liverpool aren't going to play that way. It's going to be different. So you just have to face the reality that sometimes away games are difficult, and you cannot control every element of it unless you're doing exactly what City do. And that's just the difference between the two sides. But it doesn't mean that Liverpool performed any worse at Sheffield United just because they didn't have all complete pegging them back in the way that, because you can see how that City game's probably going to go at Sheffield United, unless they take their early chances or whatever. They're just different teams, and I think that's how it changes perception of how actually Liverpool played.
I thought the Burnley comparison was quite interesting because in the ground, I was saying, me and my mates were saying, it did feel very much like Burnley. Now, if you remember Burnley, we got to half an hour, and then crosses it, Chris Wood on the back, and it's gone in, and it changes the game. And you wrote game state on a note of paper there, and it is exactly that. If we get a goal like that after half an hour, it changes the complete complexion of the game basically, and we go on. We're a lot more comfortable. We probably knock it around with a bit more confidence. They might panic a little bit, or they might go, well, we can't really afford to go 2-0 down here. Whereas I felt they grew into the game, and it was, the longer it went on, the more encouraged they were, because we didn't get that early goal that killed them like we did at Burnley.
I think game state and scoreboard pressure, Paul, I think sometimes the perception of you is a big deal. And there's a couple of things around this Liverpool side. One is you don't want to let it break on you. Liverpool are really good in transition. They're really good on counter-attack. You don't want to let it break on you. I think that's a thing. I think that gets into the mindset of opponents. The other thing that's also currently, I think, in the mindset of opponents is you don't get many chances against Liverpool, so when they come, you've got to take them. And again, when you're behind in a game, as a game wears on, using Mason Mount from the week before, it's not as good a chance as I think it was painted retrospectively, but I think you can say he snatches at it, and he snatches at it because of the game state, because he knows that they're only one behind, the clock's ticking away, and he's got this opportunity, and oh my God, I can score here. And I think that these are things, again, in a very sort of 10 years ago Man United way, where at the minute Liverpool are just sort of completely in the ascendancy, and the way in which you then go about your business defending 2-on-2 against their 2 in a way which is, we back ourselves all the time. I think all of this feeds into this idea that once Liverpool get ahead, it's just going to be so hard for you.
Yeah, I think there's loads of that. But interestingly, from the sort of Sheffield United perspective, when I was chatting to quite a few lads after the match, including my mate, they were pissed off that they'd missed chances, but they expected to miss chances, because that's one of their problems, is that as loads of sort of lower down the table teams have, they don't have the quality of strikers we have. Where they were seeing that come out more was they were making, and we don't get to see this usually because we don't watch the other team every week. They were saying they were still making defensive mistakes because of the pressure of playing us, when ordinarily it would just be, this isn't an issue. And I've mentioned to my mate, the one that always sticks in my head was, I can't remember who it was, but for Stoke when Suarez was playing, and there's just a long up and over ball.
Shawcross it was
it
yeah.
Shawcross, and all he had to do was go and head it, and instead of just thinking I'm just going to go and head it, he's literally looking around to see where Luis Suarez is, and then the ball bounces. And once the ball bounced, I remember watching it probably with you and a few others, and we were like, "Oh lad," because once it's bounced, Suarez like, "I've got you now," and he just like nudged him off the ball, took it, and scored. And that was the almost the purest example of that happening, and it happened a few times in the game, not to that extent, but even things like we've been talking in recent weeks about lads just falling over, and I saw Carragher getting interviewed on Sky and talking about like the hardest team he ever played against, and he referenced the Arsenal Henry team. And I remember being in Highbury when Henry stood him up and like dropped his shoulder, and Carragher just fell over, just dropped on his arse. And I'm seeing that more and more now with the teams that play us. Like the one, and they made a big deal of it. I saw a clip on Twitter about Joe, the lad ended up blocking it with his head on the halfway line against Firmino. But he had just fallen over inexplicably for like no reason at all. And I think it is just that thing of, you are so deeply inside the heads, and for good reason, as we've referenced already. And I don't think I think that there has been a massive desire to say Sheffield United should have won because of the difference in the levels of the teams, I suppose. But you can't get away from the quality of the chances like that. I'd forgotten actually about the Mane one. I'd forgotten all about the first Mane one.
The long ball from Van Dijk.
The long ball from Van Dijk. He'd usually slot that.
Oh, yeah.
And if he slots that, and because I was like thinking about Joe stages of the game for, well, did they get their big chance before we got our big chance? If they'd have taken that, but that was the first moment of the game, pretty much a big moment. If he scores that, I think we end up with they get to watch the champions of Europe pairing and leave that game going, God, it's one of the best teams we've seen, and blah, 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 blah. Plus, then we have the one where we very much looked like, I thought, from the other end of the pitch, high up, the one where Mane hits the post. It looked to me like it was like, yeah, we're just going to score here, and we'll just pick who scores the goal, and we were just a little bit relaxed about it. We score either of those, and they can talk all they want about we're in their heads for missing chances, but their chances at the other end were, if you take the emotion out of it, they're not big chances,
like
really.
The Callum Robinson one where he drives it wide is a really difficult chance.
Really, like if he scores from there, it's like the Newcastle one the other week, isn't it? You're saying, God, that's the best goal he'll probably ever score. Yeah. And then there was a header which I laughed in the night actually, because they didn't even show it on Match of the Day, and that was one of the ones that in the pub afterwards they were saying he should have scored that header, and I was saying it's easy to say that on the ground, but with a cross and a lad jumping for a ball, it only has to be an inch too high, and it's impossible for him to score, and that's possibly what it was.
There is, in general, let's sort of talk through it a little bit more and go through the game, David. I liked them playing 2 up against us. I think it worked relatively well, but what it does is it then leaves them a little bit light in other places and people joining. But also, you got to see both Matip and Van Dijk do a fair bit of defending, and I think that across the board, the goalkeeper, the 2 centre-halves and Fabinho, out of possession, because I think even all 4 of them are guilty of giving it away at times during the game because of the same issues we talked about with passing lanes. But out of possession, they are Liverpool's best performers by some distance. I think all 4 of them have very, very, very good games. Even though the keeper doesn't have a big save to make, he's still very prominent, very alive in the game, very dynamic off his line.
Yeah, it was it's nice to see sort of two strikers going up. Even though they don't play 4-4-2, it was nice to see two strikers go up against two centre halves in that really old school way of it was just a physical battle of like the ball coming up in the air and can Joel Matip, can Van Dijk win their individual battles. I was actually quite impressed by the way that Robinson pushed on, and he's actually quite a threat in the air. It was quite hard to deal with, and McBurney in particular sort of even though he didn't necessarily win a header against Van Dijk, he came as close as anyone's come. He made it. Van Dijk wasn't heading it where he wanted to. Yeah. So then sometimes the ball was dropping to a midfielder arriving and things like that. So I was quite impressed by those two. It's quite an interesting battle to watch. But again, Liverpool centre halves are both, not just Van Dijk now. Joel Matip is in the form of his life, and I thought he was absolutely sensational. There's
huge trust, I think, Paul, and I think that when use Matip as an example, we've lived through this. There's a new keeper. For me, it was really interesting. There's one where he comes off his line, the keeper, and slides in to kick a distance down the pitch. And when that happened against Arsenal, Van Dijk very much got in each other's way, him and Van Dijk. This time, nope, that doesn't happen at all. Adrian's in control of the situation. We've lived through Van Dijk having to be convinced by Matip, going right the way back to January of this year, and there being a few games where there's a bit of back and forth with them. Fabinho's come on leaps and bounds. Now that little four looks like there's just huge trust, absolutely huge trust, huge mutual respect. Everyone's getting on with the jobs.
Absolutely, and it's no coincidence that they've played with each other loads now. They're settled. There are certain things, going back to what I said before, there's certain things in football that are not rocket science. It's age old. It's not who's the cleverest manager. It's these lads have played together loads. They know what each other's going to do. Something I noticed actually from sitting behind Adrian, because I usually watch the match at Anfield from the side of the pitch, he's just barking at them constantly, barking at them. And there was loads in it where I was saying to my mate, I can talk you through why they're content to let Mignolet. I know there was sort of circumstances around it, but I don't think they'd have been that bothered about letting Mignolet go when they could bring in Adrian, because as a type of goalkeeper, he's a much better fit. But just going back to the centre backs thing, it made me laugh actually coming out of the game. And I saw this. I don't know what all your views were. It felt like, because I listened to the post match show with Robbo, and everyone was raving about Matip, and I was raving about Matip, and then I went on Twitter and people were saying Van Dijk man of the match, and I was like, isn't this funny? Because I was saying to my mates in the ground, Van Dijk's got to that level now where we just almost don't notice he is the best player on the pitch. And even your reference there, and even as you're saying, we start smiling, because it's like, this guy had a really good game against him. I mean, he didn't win any headers. but he
He's 6'5", he didn't win any headers.
And even, I've talked about this in the past, even the physics of that, like the way they're standing on the pitch, he's 6'5" and he's in front of Van Dijk. I mean, just the physics means he should win some of them, shouldn't he? He's in front of him. He's literally, but no, and we're giving people credit for like, oh, he got the closest anyone's got to,
yeah.
and
I was being like you with those Sheffield United fans.
Yeah, that's exactly. But you know what? In the ground, I could feel it. All the Sheffield United fans were like, Van Dijk, like, to keep it away from him. Like, it's ridiculous this. And it's almost like we're cheating having him on the pitch. So now we just completely ignore this incredible man of the match performance. But then equally, in fairness, Matip's fantastic, and he's got a performance where they can go on Match of the Day, look at this lad, and just completely ignore the Colossus next to him.
There's something on Van Dijk's performance. I think first and foremost, it was one of those ones that does actually split the idea of, we've had this conversation quite recently, the idea of what you see in the ground and what you see on the telly. And I think it was a really strong one for that, Phil, in that in the ground you're watching Matip have to repeatedly battle, and on the telly you're getting seeing Van Dijk's unbelievable anticipation at times. And for me, one of the things that struck me was he was like passing out or putting things out for throws that should just be getting blammed out for corners. That he was that stuff where you think he's got to kill himself not to come off second best, he's just completely in control of. It was tremendous from that point of view.
I don't think I've ever seen a centre-back play the game at their own pace before.
Yeah.
Which is a ridiculous thing, because defending's supposed to be reactive to an extent. I mean, there's obviously situations where you can be proactive, but he's not really doing either of those things, if that's actually possible. He's just doing his own thing and going, oh, well, there's a ball, he can have it, and then I'll win it off him, or I'll just have that. Whatever. I'm here. I'm here. It doesn't matter. He's not getting past me. I'll just do what I want. But Matip was in a battle, and that's sort of why some people will think Matip looked great and some people won't, because obviously when you're in a battle like that, you're not going to win all the time.
Yep.
Whereas
Van Dijk does.
When you're not in a battle all the time, which Van Dijk almost isn't. You can't lose.
Yeah, it's.
I've got loads of theories. I've been banging about the Matrix a lot in my personal life in recent times. So
Excellent news, Paul.
I hope I'm not as confused at the end of this sentence when I was at the end of the Matrix.
But you know what? I started in my own head with the Matrix, and then I went to a different example, which I'm going to come to next. Because I was like, for weeks I've been saying he's just playing this game in the Matrix. We're going to find out one day he's just in a different dimension. But then I realised, I referenced the other day. Do you remember Back to the Future 2, where Biff gets the almanac that gives him all the results? I think it's a step beyond the Matrix, because the Matrix is you're in the moment and you can just see it all in slow motion. I think someone's given him the guidebook of what's happening for the rest of the time. So when he's on the pitch, he's just like, no, don't worry about it, lads. I know where he's going to go next. And everyone's like, what? It's like, watch. I'm just going to go and stand over here, and then he's going to run into me, and then I'm going to pass it to Robertson. And everyone's like, that is completely impossible. And then he's like, see?
It's a bit like in baseball, the fielders have like cards in the pocket so they know where to stand for each player.
Yeah.
Except he's got a card in his pocket that tells him what the player's going to do.
Exactly.
And he's already done it.
I do like the idea, though, that he's not seeing footballers in Bramall Lane. He's just seeing binary pouring down in front of him.
Yeah. There's something you were in. I said you were all on the ground, and there's something else, which was that their crowd was very, very up for it. And I think David, the goal kills them for 10 minutes. And I think if there's maybe an area, and it isn't just the idea Salah misses. I think Salah misses reignites them, but I don't think it is as simple as Salah misses. This Liverpool side, I think, has been, if you're looking for areas to really maybe say that they could do better during this game, this Liverpool side's been really, really good this season, I think, at 1-0. And I don't think they are as good at 1-0 in this game. I think it may well be because the goal comes quite late. But that is one where I think they could be doing a lot better at 1-0. They really should be, because Sheffield United, that's the moment where they've gone, where the crowd's quiet and where everyone's gone, oh God. And certainly the nature of the goal, Liverpool should have built on it probably.
Is that not maybe where you make a concession to the fact that Sheffield United were just good, though? You know what I mean? I just thought it's all right for us to sort of sit there and watch the game, and I had a decent vantage from the press box, so you can see when Liverpool are controlling, and yeah, you know, maybe they didn't do as much of that at 1-0 as they would have liked for those final 20 minutes. But do you just sometimes have to say Sheffield United are at home, fans are absolutely sensational. That's genuinely the most impressed I've been by one of the grounds I've been to in terms of the support. I thought they were excellent. You know, they were up for it. You know, even after the goal, it does kill them a little bit, but straight after the goal, they start singing the goalkeeper's name. So it's like, right, that's a message that, okay, we can go 1-0 down to the European champions. We're not bothered. We're going to keep going. So the plan didn't change then for Sheffield United, did it? You know, they're a side who know that they're maybe going to be 1-0 down. So it could have happened earlier in the game. And they just sort of, you know, let's carry on playing our football, trying to get down the sides. And they just kept that up. So it's, you know, it's easy for us to say, you know, you can control it better and manage it. But that is so difficult, isn't it, in reality?
Well, it's another game state conversation, isn't it, David? Because I think with this season, when we've gone ahead, saying before, for instance, Mane just before half time against Southampton, then Liverpool come out for the 15 minutes after the break, and they're absolutely tremendous. You know, you can look at there's a similar sort of comparison point around, for instance, Burnley 1-0 to 2-0, bang bang. But I think that's partially because those goals are coming at certain times in the game. I think by 70, 75 minutes, everything's a little bit different, and suddenly 1-0 doesn't necessarily feel like it's something that you've got to build on desperately because you've only got to hold it for 20.
Yeah. So Liverpool are in that no man's land of sort of thinking, well, 20 minutes left, we probably could just see this out. We're good enough to do it. So yeah, and I think that sort of encourages Sheffield United in a way. So yeah, I mean, and even in saying this, that they maybe didn't control it as well. How good was Fabinho at winning little free kicks and in dangerous areas and keeping the ball away, shielding the ball?
Hammam, wasn't it?
They were furious about that, by the way.
Yeah,
they were furious. It was cheating, and you're like, well...
It was brilliant, wasn't it?
Gets his arse in the way and then flops on the floor. Well done.
Yeah, and little things like that. And I thought Liverpool did do a bit of that in the middle of, you know, Sheffield United having a real go. So I thought, you can't always control it. And I thought they did as probably as well as they could do, maybe. Okay,
we'll be back in a second or two to have a chat about Divock Origi. Mo Salah will be getting on to chat about Salzburg as well. Liverpool found a way against Sheffield United. They tend to do that. Joined briefly by John Gibbons to discuss our partnership with The Athletic. John, on board until the end of the season, and that's pretty exciting for us in terms of the range of shows that we've got and being able to work closely with them.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, ever since The Athletic started, I found it really useful in terms of, you know, for for Anfield Wrap stuff, both in terms of the stuff we do around other clubs, but also just reading more about Liverpool. I think the pieces have been really good. I think it's excellent, and so it's nice to have a partner who I can generally say I'm using all the time. I can genuinely recommend. I'm sure our subscribers, if they aren't enjoying them, will do if they want to sign up, and it feels like we've got obviously a bit of shared values with, because I think both of us are obviously charging for content and feeling like the content we produce is worth paying for, and luckily there are a lot of people out there who agree, and I'd rather pay a few pounds every month for something really good, and something that's been thought about, and something that's been created kind of with a little bit more care. And so I'm glad to see them doing well, and really pleased that they're partnering with us going forward.
We are absolutely delighted about it. The way in which we're going to be working with them as much as we can is getting their very, very good writers on board to do bits and pieces with us. We're still going to be using our fan voices for things around Coach Home and Friday show. We love that, and we love those shows. I mean, that should come through, the care and affection that's in them for those people who subscribe to All Player. And if you don't, maybe think about that. We're doing that work every single week. But we're also going to be add to that with journalists who are covering these teams almost every single, literally every single week, covering them all the time, doing the business, and they can let us know what's going on at those sides. We've also got the insight that we can get for European shows. We're going to be bringing that back very, very soon indeed as well. Really looking forward to that, and lower league stuff as well, and just in general, really, John, as you say, reading it, and if there's anything interesting in there, anything we want to really explore further, we can, as we do anyway, and as we would do with a number of our journalists, and we've used people who are on the Athletic anyway. We see them as our friends regardless, being able to give them a call and say, let's have a chat about that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's nice to do that. We probably used to do that a little bit more than we do now, didn't we?
Definitely.
Remember the old midnight caller days, Neil?
I love the midnight caller. Let's do more of them, John. Let's bring them back.
Well, this is the avenue to do so. This is the avenue to do kind of more of them, really, because sometimes, when someone writes something really interesting, you are interested, but you've got questions. There's little bits that you'd like to sort of follow up with them. So this will give us a chance to do so, and just to kind of go into it. We'll be your voice and go, what did you mean by that?
Yeah,
that sort of thing. Yeah. So So obviously, if you guys see anything interesting in the Athletic, do kind of give us a nudge, and we can maybe kind of introduce that either into the weekend or as you say, to kind of standalone shows, because I think as much as digging as you can do on some of these issues, it is really, really interesting.
It is indeed. If you want to sign up with us, you go to theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap. That's theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap. We'll be mentioning that through as we're bringing people on and bringing voices on. We're really looking forward to it, to be quite honest with you. It's been something that we've been working on for the last few weeks and months. Really pleased that they've come with the Anfield Wrap, and will be with us until the end of the season. And then we will go from there. But for now, it is theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap. If you want to sign up at the minute, you can get an annual plan off the basis of that, which is at half the monthly price normally. That's on there, $2.49 a month. It comes out as you pay for the whole year up front. Theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap. We'll get back on now with the main show. Thanks to John for popping in and doing that. The sub is something which he does it early, David, and I think that's one of the things that you take away from it, is that he does it. This is pretty early. It's a change of shape. It obviously helps that Origi comes on and plays well. I think it's much of the muchness, although Wijnaldum goes and gets the goal, which of Wijnaldum and Henderson could have gone off. I was thinking that when I was watching it live. You keep Fabinho on, you put one of them in, you do 4-2-3-1. But it was also a nature of the game. Liverpool it was theoretically 3 against 3 in midfield, but because of the way Sheffield United were playing, Liverpool didn't need 3 midfielders in there. It's a hugely practical sub. You'd almost half wonder if he might have been tempted to do it at half time.
Yeah, at the post-match press conference, I asked him about it, because I sort of, Jordan Henderson had been down, hadn't he, like maybe 10 minutes beforehand, sort of got a bit of a knock or something like that. So I thought it might have been injury related, and then he's also thought, well, while I'm making the sub, I might as well sort of go for it a little bit. But he said, no, purely tactical. He said one of the things he wanted to do was to sort of, because it goes 4-2-3-1, is drop Firmino a little bit deeper, so he can get on the ball a bit more, which is something that Liverpool had struggled to do, because usually he finds it so easy to drift away from the 2 centre-halves, doesn't he? And then just turn on that pocket and he's in. But because they could always spare a centre-half to go with him, he was really struggling to get into that space. So that was what the idea was. And you could, it's such a good sub in that it actually does lead to the goal, because not only is Origi the one who crosses it for the clearance, but because you've then got 4 attackers on the pitch rather than 3, they all pushed into the box. that makes Sheffield United drop deeper, and then Gini Wijnaldum's in acres of space to hit the ball, and although obviously he gets a bit of luck with the goal, he's hit it quite well. It's it's wet, it's difficult conditions for the goalkeeper, and the chance only comes about because Sheffield United can't spare a man at the edge of the box, so perfect substitution.
Minor concern for Divock, and I'm saying this in the context of the fact that he came on and was, I think, really good, is that he's quite the sub. He's very much played himself into possibly best sub in the country territory. And that is, from a professional footballer's point of view, a lot of that will depend on the mentality that he has and how he sort of looks at the game. Because I think we missed him against Napoli. I think you can make an argument we missed him against Chelsea. I think in both of those games he would have got on and he would have got 20 minutes minimum.
He'd have won 4 corners.
And he'd have forced them back, and I think he might have genuinely changed it positively against Napoli from a 0-0 situation, as he does here. And he wasn't great last time he got a start, it's fair to say, and we were struggling a little bit with him last time he got the start, but he finds himself currently absolutely in one way essential to this Liverpool side, but it is fundamentally going to be from the bench.
I wonder though if it was a bit not necessarily due to the bench, more to the fact that he played with the other 3, because when he usually starts, it's usually because one of them's not playing.
Really fair.
Because he always starts on the left and it puts Mane through the middle, which I don't think works. But it was actually Mane moved to the right, and then there was Firmino dropped in, and there was Salah through the middle. And as opposed to Sheffield United just having 3 of them to worry about, they were able to look at the other 3 as well and still go, right, well, he's not as good as the other 3, so we're a bit happy with them having the ball and making sure they're a bit covered. I think I'd be interested to see it actually from the start of a few games, because Firmino was struggling to get on the ball, and he got on the ball. He seemed to get on the ball a hell of a lot more when he dropped sort of 5-10 yards.
Yeah.
But Origi got a lot more space than he would have done under normal circumstances if he'd have come on for one of them as opposed to Jordan Henderson, I think.
The other thing that happens, which Phil says there, Paul, is Mane drops right. And it's really interesting to me. Mane goes over to the right, and there's 2 things that happen. One is he's better at tracking than Salah. Salah, I think, is actually better at pressing than we give him credit for when the ball's in front of him, but he doesn't track. He was tracking during the game. He's not lazy, but he's not instinctively a wide midfielder in the way Mane is able to be. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that then happens then, if you're suddenly Ender Stevens, you're going, there's 4 of them, and I could do with dropping in a little bit more. And I think it does change it. I think that the manager's sub doesn't just work tactically from the point of view of how it gets Liverpool on the front foot, but it also does give Sheffield United, and I think specifically that area of the pitch, it gets suddenly harder for them there. They're not now dealing with Jordan Henderson 15 yards deeper than where Mane is. They've got Mane, he's on the front foot, but all of a sudden, if you're Ender Stevens, you're turning to your manager saying, do I go goal side of him, or do we keep being brave up here? Because this isn't easy.
Yeah, I think there's actually quite a lot in the sort of psychology behind that sub that I've not really seen talked about, and maybe it was because I was sort of having to summarise to my mate before the game what we're like and what we do, and he was asking about what team we'd play, and I got to tell him about where we've actually got like a first choice 11 pretty much now, and we've actually got a shape, and it's easy to forget that we didn't. When Klopp first came in, there was more tweaking and testing and seeing.
At this time last season, there was.
But now there isn't. And as that wore on, I was like, oh, he's changing the shape here with that sub. And I think, go back a step. Even talking about the start of the second half, I'd been saying to my mate at half time, the problem you've got here is what we usually do when we've had a half like this, and you've had the best first half I think I've seen against us. We figure it out at half time because we have analysts saying to them, lads, I know you've struggled to figure this out on the pitch, but there's massive gaps here and here, and you need to do this and that'll sort it out. And then we come out after half time and Matip just starts strolling through the middle of the pitch, and you can see in the ground, I could feel it, and on the pitch it was like, they're like, oh, what do we do with this now? We're not expecting this. And then that was the moment actually where I expected, when you talked before about we weren't as good after going 1-0 up, that was the spell I didn't think we were as good at, because there were a couple of little moments. There was a little one with Robertson and Mane down the left where we had a little triangle, we cut them apart, and I thought this is where we're going to click into gear now, and this is where they're just going to fall, and it never quite happened. So then that flows into, okay, I need to do something else. I need to do something from the bench, the change of shape, the Origi down the left. So I think that's all fascinating because we don't usually do that, and I did say to him afterwards, that's a compliment to you, that he's having to find these solutions, which he doesn't usually need to do. And then in fairness to Origi, when I was chatting about when I looked at our bench, I was like, oh, the sub for me would probably be Oxlade-Chamberlain for Henderson, because you'll get that drive through the midfield. And I completely dismissed Origi, and I think I've still got sort of some bias against him, probably because I still don't think he's at the level we need. But that comes down to what he's like when he starts. I'm with you. As a substitute, and we're talking about this after the game. I've said this before. He's absolutely massive. He's really, really fast. He's skillful. Like, he pulled off a couple of tricks going down that side where you're like, nice that, mate. And I think I still underrate him in that role. I can't imagine anybody on that pitch when he comes on down that side is happy at all. And then on the wider point again, sitting in the end, my mate immediately turned to him and went, so you're going to have 4 of them on now? And I went, yeah. And you've got to think as well, and I've talked about this with Origi before, about when everyone wants us to sign someone. To them, forget what we all think of Divock Origi. To them, that's a lad who scored a goal in the Champions League final to win it for us. That's the lad who scored 2 against Barcelona. They all watch these games. So to them, it's like, Jesus Christ, now they're bringing on Divock Origi. And we're all a bit like, So you've got to take into account the different effects it has on them compared to us.
This is the first time I think we've had to see this season, David, because again, game state has almost become the mini theme for the show, but it's the first time I think we've had to see. There's 2 things. We can say Liverpool are a little bit blunt, even though we've talked before Origi comes on, they have 2 really good chances. They're going to have a third one with Salah, But you can say that Liverpool maybe are a little bit blunt, but there's a flip side, I think, which is Liverpool have exhausted Sheffield United. They've really, really made them put a lot in physically and mentally. They've had to go through everything. And then there is the idea of the change. And I think it's maybe the first time this season where we've seen the manager maybe have to win it from the bench. And I think that at the minute, I understand I don't think, for instance, Liverpool's first choice midfield as it is now will necessarily be the first choice midfield come next April for Liverpool. I think there might be a couple of changes in there which may lead to a little bit more creativity from those areas. But one thing that midfield does is it just keeps working and it keeps running and it keeps asking questions of the opposition, even if it doesn't always provide answers for Liverpool. I think that this is the first time we've had to see the manager being able to turn to his bench and go, I'll sort this.
Yeah, and maybe he thinks that 3 has got through enough work and done enough to grind Sheffield United down that he can actually expend a midfielder for a forward. It's quite a brave choice, isn't it? Because we haven't seen that 4-2-3-1, regularly at all, since he sort of abandoned it halfway through last season, which sort of cost Shaqiri all his minutes and, didn't really see him much at all for the back end of last season. So, yeah, it's a brave move, but obviously he's probably thinking what you say there, Neil, is that, yeah, we have done enough here. We've set a platform that I can leave 2 men in there and let's go for it. And, like I said, it did work, didn't it? It worked perfectly.
We've talked all the way through the summer about, for instance, Paul's hinted at it there, Phil, get another option. But I think and I think he will be right to feel as though that he's probably now able to field, and let's remember he is still leaving footballers at home. He is able to field possibly the strongest bench that he's had in his time since he's been at the club. I think he can. He can feel as though he has game-changing options on there one way or another.
Do you think on the bench, do you think it's a little bit weird that we need Lovren and Gomez on that bench on Saturday? Like, what has to happen for when James Milner's there as well? What has to happen for Lovren, Gomez and James Milner to be all used as substitutes?
Well,
like,
I agree.
Would it not be better to leave Lovren off and put Brewster on the bench? Because they talk about Brewster, this, that and the other, say he's brilliant, etc. And okay, he wasn't brilliant at MK Dons the other night. But if you're 3-0 up in that game with 20 minutes to go, you can give him 20 minutes. Like, the only way that Lovren is getting on the pitch is if 2 players have already got injured. Because if a fullback gets injured, it'll be James Milner that comes on for one of the, or you bring Gomez on. Then if another fullback gets injured, it'll be Milner that comes on. If it's a centre back that gets injured instead, it'll probably still be Milner that comes on, and they'll just move Gomez inside.
I thought the same thing.
I just look at it, and it was the same in Naples as well. You don't need that many players to cater for emergencies.
Do you not think it's just a squad man? I just saw it and thought squad management. Like, he's got to at least make it look to Dejan Lovren like he's involved somewhere. And he's had a game midweek, and he's like, yeah, just come with us. Basically, it's almost like, just come with us. Just come with us for the day out. Because I'm with you. Like, what are the situations?
But then I suppose, is that the same for Brewster then? Is what would have to happen for him to have got on the pitch, though?
I'm actually starting to get a little bit concerned about the Brewster thing in the way that we've told him he'll be involved. And we're now basically in October, and he hasn't been on a bench bar the Super Cup, and he's had 1 start, which was in a scratch team against the MK Dons. And it's getting to the point where there's going to be kids going, well, you said this to him and you think he's brilliant, and not using him. And it wasn't, I mean, you don't necessarily have to bring him on Saturday, but could still be on the bench.
I think it's really interesting in general. I think that there's, and we will do a show in the international break. I'm going to do on pathways, because I think that there's. I always say on these shows that I think the manager's small c conservative, and I think he's full of things he'd like to do, but ultimately as you get closer and closer to kick-off times, he very much exceeds the reality that's in front of him, and that's fine in that, and he's a brilliant football manager, and he's got his 97 points and won us the Champions League, and he's absolutely incredible. But there is a thing around, I think, that he has his percentage choices, and he will make his percentage choices, and he's very similar in one way to, for instance, Benitez, but because the demeanours are massively different, we don't sort of anticipate it in the same way.
I think there's another side of it as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if not quite this conversation, but I wouldn't be surprised if what he's saying to the likes of Brewster is, it wasn't like, oh, you're going to get loads of games at the beginning of the season. I think when he's picking these squads now, he's thinking to himself, that as football go, the chances are this will all sort itself out for me after Christmas, because Adam Lallana will get injured, and now I'm not putting him on my bench, so Brewster can have that spot. Or, you know, Mo Salah will pick up a knock and be out for 4 games, and that just has a knock-on effect through the squad.
Yeah, but it's more though that basically if Shaqiri had been fit, Shaqiri would be on the bench and Lovren probably wouldn't.
Yep. So why
are you replacing an attacking midfielder who can play in the front three with a centre back? It just doesn't make a great deal of sense.
Possibly, but we're going to come on and talk about Salzburg in a minute, and it wouldn't surprise me if he lashes Lovren in. Would not surprise me if he lashes Lovren in. We'll come on and talk about that in a minute or two. I just want to do one more little thing on this game and about Mo Salah, Paul. He's got this really, really interesting knack of playing himself out of form in a way that you don't really see from, like, it's an odd thing to see footballers do in this way, but he really does seem to be very good at it. He seems to get himself onto a lovely run of not scoring with efforts. When you do the whole thing around, oh yeah, they've got to be in the right position, there's at the times I think he's one of the few forwards where I would say I could do without Salah being in the position to miss them, because he then gets himself into a little rut of missing them for a period. Most forwards, you would say, when they're not playing well, they're not getting in the positions, and you go, oh well, when he starts getting in the positions, it'll click. For Salah, he can almost get in the positions a little bit too much for a period of time, and suddenly it's like, oh, I'm crap again now. And then it might be that he gets one early on against Leicester, goes on and gets a second, and then before you know where we are, we're talking about 8 league goals and 6 league games, and he's back being Mo Salah. But it's a really, really strange thing. Yeah, it is, and I'm with you. It's just something we have to live with, I suppose, isn't it? There was a lovely little clip. Did you see the clip of Oxlade-Chamberlain getting interviewed on the Club TV channel, where they said to him about, like, is he greedy? And he basically said, yeah, he's boss. But into it, I'm not bothered. Like, I could not care less. I talked about, like, playing. I love doing the comparisons with whatever level you play at, because football is football at the end of the day. And when we're playing football, we're playing against lads who are the similar quality to us, so it all levels itself out. There's a lad, one of our mates who I play with, and he's brilliant, and he's the best footballer who hasn't made it pro or semi-pro I've ever played with or seen. And when I'm playing with him, I don't even make a run anymore. Like, he's got the ball in front of goal with 3 lads ahead of him, and I just stand and watch and think, if he usually when he loses it, because he's a lot heavier and slower than he used to be, and I've still got this image in my head of what he was like 10 years ago. But I said to him, we were watching what match, the Champions League game together, and I said to him, it's like watching you. Like, you will not give the ball to me in front of goal, and I do not blame you one bit. I'm not as good as you. It's as simple as that. So it was really refreshing to see Chamberlain be like, yeah, of course. So I think where the problem then comes in, obviously, and that's why we've had this big thing recently with the Mane kick-off and stuff, is that there are 2 lads up alongside him who are brilliant, and Mane's like, well, actually, mate, there's a big argument now that I'm better than you in front of goal, so give me the ball. But I think that's just one of those things we have to put up with. Even the one he missed, you've got Firmino busting a gut to just roll it in front of me. It's not quite there, you know.
It's not. I know. It was only when I watched it back, actually, and it was interesting. The ground, the Sheffield United fans didn't see it. I was like, he could have rolled Firmino in, and they were like, could he? What? When? What? Because they're just focused on Salah. But when I watched it back, I was like, yeah, it was more difficult than it could have been. But yeah, I don't know. I think we just have to suck it up. We have seen this in the past, haven't we? We have seen incredibly good centre forwards just go through those spells, and it's just a case of, it's a bit like, do you know that the Alisson-Adrian thing? I'm made up. Like, everyone's banging on about City's injuries and completely forgetting that we've got the best goalie in the world and he hasn't played all season pretty much. And for me, it's a case of, when Salah's like this, just get through it. If you can get to the end of that spell and you've got Alisson back and then Salah clicks back into gear, you're looking around at other teams then and thinking, you've missed it. I really like Chris Wilder, actually. Like, I'm not sure I'd like him as our manager, but I like watching him as a manager of another team. When when he was like, yeah, we missed an opportunity there. Regardless, forget any sort of wider analysis. They weren't at their best, and we've missed it. We've missed the chance. We won't get that again. And I think there's loads of that.
I think a run of home games will do Salah good as well, because I just think he feels more, when he's in these little ruts, it's just so much more comfortable to score at Anfield, where he knows where every blade of grass, and and then once he gets one, he'll go on a little run, and I think that'll be helpful for him.
Was he scoring many at this time last year? I'm
No,
just trying to think,
he was-
and I
he
don't
was
think
getting
I'm trying to
widely panned,
remember. I
actually.
don't think he was.
Yeah, we sort of move him 9 for a bit. I think he's still sort of dealing. He's not fully fit at this point.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sort of come across fully fit. He's finding it a little tricky. He ends up moving 9. There's also something, I think, the other thing which is different to last season, though, is I think Firmino gets dealt with a fair bit at the start of last season, and people put a lot of energy into stopping Firmino, and that's sort of gone now because Mane and Salah come as strong as they do towards the end of the season. But Firmino's not able to supply Salah in the way in which he had been the previous sort of April, and that's got a little bit harder, so the manager changes it a little bit for a period and goes from there. As someone who is silky as anything, David Lynch, why do people not round goalkeepers anymore? Like, it's not, this isn't just a Salah thing. It drives me mad.
Why I don't.
Well, I'm not.
I don't think I could shoot inside the box.
No,
in fives,
there's shooters out of the box in fives. But why don't forwards round goalkeepers anymore? In that Henderson does all right for that, but he's very much just set himself and gone, and he's very still. And Salah's moving at some pace. This isn't just a Salah thing. I'm intrigued by the fact that
I think it's because they stand up longer now, goalkeepers.
Yeah.
I don't think they go. Their centre of gravity is a lot higher than it used to be, I think.
So there's the idea that they can recover from having set themselves.
Because Henderson stood up for that.
Yeah, I know. I think
he stood up and hung his leg out, which you don't see very often from a keeper on a one-on-one.
Yeah. No, I'm with the fact that he does that, but I think he does stand up and he stands big, but my point is he stands, if you know what I mean. Salah's moving at such pace on his left-hand side. I don't think it takes much for Salah to move it left and even just completely change the angle, and suddenly Henderson's scrambling.
He wasn't that far out, though, I think Henderson might only be about 6 or 7 yards out of his goal, which means... And he was on the left post as well. So it means if Salah does shift it left, I think it's a real very shame. Slight angle.
Is it a 2-footed issue?
It might be.
If he's
Could
more
Sadio
comfortable on
Mane
his
have done
right.
Is that what you mean?
Is Sadio more 2-footed?
Well, Sadio rounded
I'd
Mane's
say
definitely
so,
more
yeah.
Sadio rounded the keeper at Crystal Palace a year ago.
Yeah.
I'm just basically, like, not just Liverpool, I just think it's a shame goalkeepers don't get rounded these days. Like, it's one of my favourite things to see in football is when someone stands the keeper up and just goes, see you later, and knocks it into an empty net.
Well, everyone says it's an incredible save, which you've got to give the goalie credit for that. But when you look at it like that, he is just standing still and he doesn't move, and Salah kicks it straight at his leg. When you think about it that way, don't you?
I think that's a little bit harsh. He's moved his leg to the ball.
Does he?
Yeah.
Am I being
I thought it was a really good save.
It is a really good save, but I just want to see keepers sat down more often.
Remember
please.
the best one of them was when Torres basically dummied. Was it either Shea Given or Steve Harper on Boxing Day?
Oh yeah.
And he basically just dropped his shoulder.
Yeah.
And the next thing you knew, the goalkeeper sat down and Torres was just like, he hadn't even gone past him.
And it's tremendous.
He hadn't even gone past him. I think he's in front of him and he just rolled it in.
Who was it tried to do that the other week? Was it someone from the opposition tried to do it? And I remember saying to mate and going, "You're not Fernando Torres, mate." Because when you get that wrong, it looks just horrendous. You're just like, why did you run away from the ball? Why are you dropping your shoulder? You haven't even got the ball.
Salzburg then, Liverpool having defeated Sheffield United and moved themselves along Salzburg. It's a really big game, David, and they're a very fit side, and they've won 6-2. Obviously Napoli beat Liverpool. Listen, it is only the second group game, but it is also simultaneously one that Liverpool feel as though they've got to win. That said, are you expecting to see any changes? I think there might be something in the back line. I think it wouldn't surprise me if there's 2. I don't think we'll be talking about 4 or 5.
No, maybe a Joe Gomez coming in, something like that. I don't think he'd do anything drastic just because this game is big because of what happened in Naples, and also when he's talked about Salzburg, Jürgen sounds like he's got a huge amount of respect for them. I think probably because reputedly playing a very similar style. I can't say that I'm an expert in the Austrian Bundesliga, but we know that they're hard running. They're not going to make it easy for Liverpool, but I do think even now we're talking about tactically how well set up they are and the way people talk about them. Liverpool will have too much strength for them at Anfield, so they probably could afford to make a couple of changes. Maybe you bring a Milner into midfield or a Gomez, but I don't think he's going to go too crazy just because we're in a decent run of more than decent run of form, and I just think he'll want to make sure they get these 3 points on board.
It wouldn't surprise me to see no changes. Depending on I don't it's like the typical don't look too far ahead. I literally don't look at fixture lists anymore, not because of anything other than not that arsed about any games beyond what the next one is. So what's the game after Leicester?
There's an international break.
Manchester United away after the international break.
So I think there's an argument for, and I think we saw a bit of this on Saturday actually. We all have in our heads, and I think Jürgen as well, is like, oh yeah, we need to give these lads a rest. And then whenever they have a little break, you're like, oh, Jesus, it's like they've forgotten everything and they've got to work themselves back into it. And I think there's an argument wherein Jürgen said he's just like, well, because it's block. You look at these things in blocks. They all had the week off against MK Dons. It took them a bit to get back into it. They can just play the next 2 games.
Well, Mane and Salah don't go away for international duty again.
Mane does.
Oh, Mane does.
Yeah,
oh,
they've got a game. They've got a friendly against Brazil and Singapore. Because why wouldn't you have a friendly?
Absolutely ridiculous. What a gang of bastards. I'm livid with the Senegalese.
I'm just living with Singapore
And Brazil. And Singapore. Yeah,
Singapore have paid the money to obviously go there.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a pain.
They've made a few phone calls there. They got Brazil. They confirmed Brazil, and then they went, we need a decent opposition.
On the plus side, they'll finish because the time zones will finish about 24 hours before they did last time. The Brazilians.
Right. Okay.
If you think about it, because instead of finishing at 6 o'clock in the morning our time on the Wednesday, they probably finish at lunchtime Tuesday instead. So at least there's that.
It's a real kick in the teeth though. This film, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm annoyed with you.
I was very excited with their.
Gonna shoot the messenger on this one.
If you want to send me to Singapore to monitor it, for you,
that'd be great.
I'm all right with that.
There is though. The thing about Salzburg and Leicester is they're both massive games. Phil, they're both at Anfield, and that obviously plays in Liverpool's favour, as you would expect it to. If Liverpool beat Leicester, and this Paul Cope does not want to get ahead of himself, I very much want to get ahead of myself. If Liverpool beat Leicester, then realistically, they turn up on the 10th of November against Manchester City, and they are level with Manchester City, or still ahead of them on points. Realistically, given how the fixtures will probably go from that point onwards. That's why Leicester is an absolutely enormous game. But as I said, Salzburg's an enormous game. Do you think he might do 2 so he can do another 2?
I think you'll see Oxlade-Chamberlain in midfield. And I think Oxlade-Chamberlain and Gomez feel like the 2 most logical ones. Just to give Matip, or probably be more likely Matip, just give him a day off. Because he's been worked the last 2 games because they've been targeting that side of the pitch. He's been worked, so maybe just give it. And also they're a very quick side on the break, Salzburg, from what I've seen in them. So Gomez's pace might be a bit of a.
And in centre midfield, do you think he'll be Oxlade-Chamberlain for Henderson or Oxlade-Chamberlain for Wijnaldum?
Wijnaldum, I think. I would say.
Okay,
but maybe not. It's probably. I think it's almost a bit bigger than people think, because if we win, it feels like with the back-to-back games against Genk, that might be us with 1 foot in the last 16. But if we lose, we've probably got to go to Salzburg last game and get something. It might only be a point, but it's still not really what you want with your last group game, going away to a team who are full of energy and having to get a point. It's not,
and it's the biggest game of Salzburg's lives.
I mean, the ideal for the Champions League group is that your last game, maybe even your second last game, meaningless, and all you're doing is trying to finish top of the group, which, based on the last 3 seasons of the Champions League, given that the winners come second in the group the last 3 seasons, it doesn't actually matter that much, especially with how packed our December is. So it'll be quite nice to go out win tomorrow, get the back-to-back against Genk, and then hopefully, if Napoli then did the double over Salzburg, we'd have 9 points, they'd have 3. There'd be 3 games left. We could potentially be through after 4 games, I think.
Okay.
If we win tomorrow.
No, I'm with you. I think it's a massive game. I genuinely think. Yeah. I think I think it's not going to get the credit it deserves. As how big a fixture
possibly underestimated Salzburg.
I think they very much have.
If they were from Germany, had the same players and but played in the Bundesliga every week, people would think differently. Just simply because they play in a league that's not very high profile, and they got to the semi-finals of the Europa League 18 months ago. And all right, if you were playing, they got knocked out by Marseille, and if you were playing Marseille, you wouldn't be petrified, but you'd still think, oh, Marseille, they're traditionally quite a good side. I mean, I think if they lost yet,
I'm gonna have a look now.
I think they've won every game in the league this season. And they score about 6 million goals.
Yeah, they look absolutely, really, really dynamic.
I mean, they've got Alfinger Haaland's son up front who scored about 46 goals, and it's the 1st of October. That's only a slight exaggeration. I think he's over 20.
Yeah,
and he scored 9 goals in a game this year. The under-20, I think it was the under-20 World Cup. He scored 9 goals in a game.
Wow. But that's for me where. So in that context, are you going to risk breaking up the centre back pairing? When you've got that, it's such a big game. You still haven't got your first choice keeper in. I think the only, for me, sort of instinctively, the only changes come if like Henderson has got a knock or something like that. I see it because it's such a big game, the next two, that he will just go with the same.
Haaland has got 17 goals and 10 starts this season so far, which is quite the return. But he is currently a doubt. He is a doubt.
Flu or something?
Yeah, he's not at all well.
Tell you what, that picture you're looking at now, he does not look like Kevin De Bruyne from this angle.
He does look a lot like.
Good podcasting, that, boys.
Yeah, it's a great
Love
picture.
that.
There's an article in the Metro if you want to participate.
Yeah, hey, leave it, Dave.
Fucking
leave
got that off there, didn't you?
He does indeed look like top red Kev De Bruyne, who loved putting the Blues to the sword at the weekend. Really thought he was sticking it to Graham Sharp from 85 there. I thought Kev De Bruyne at the weekend.
That's some ball up, by the way.
It's outrageous.
Ridiculous.
It's an outrage. Some of what he's doing is an outrage.
He did that twice in 2 weeks.
It's unbelievable what he's doing.
Ball.
Well, yeah, but he can just do it wherever
exactly,
he likes because you can't do anything about it. It will be one where, I'm going to ask you for predictions on it. It is a difficult one because of the way in which it goes. I do think there's something in the conversation around they want to play like us, David, and we're better at it. And that's the main thing I'd take here is that we should be better at it. Liverpool should have a little bit too much for them. It's not a defence that gets tested very often because they've got a lot up front scoring 17 goals in 10 games. They are, they're used to being on top in games. They're not going to be on top at Anfield.
No, and it's the sort of game where, I think Haaland's son will turn up and Virgil van Dijk is waiting for him to sort of stamp out, and he hopes
You
and
don't get
dreams he
Virgil
might
van
have.
Dijk and the Austrian bun. Vina Neustadt
exactly,
haven't got
yeah.
Virgil van Dijk as centre back.
Yeah.
Van Dijk's already practicing what the other fans going to do against him.
Yeah,
Running
that's
through
the
in
thing. He's
training.
got the play card
Yeah.
in his pocket. So, yeah, as good as these are, and you've got to show them respect, and absolutely no doubt Liverpool will. I still think that a comfortable home victory is probably likely.
Comfortable home victory?
2-1, I think, feels
2-1?
possible.
I'm more with David. I think these games suit us more than Sheffield United away.
I think that there is also the sort of slight argument that Salzburg have to play a game that they don't really do normally. You see this with quite a lot of the sort of teams from the lesser leagues in the Champions League, like Red Star Belgrade away from home last season. They come to Anfield and they're like, right, we've got to defend it, and they're like, don't actually know what I'm supposed to do here.
Yeah, we don't do this. I agree.
I'm one of the best players who plays in the Serbian league. And
Are you, Phil?
I'm used to I might well be. I don't watch much Serbian football, but I might well be. But they can come to Anfield and they go, right, we're really good on a week-to-week basis at going at teams and winning games, and now they've got to come to Anfield playing a completely different way that they just don't practice. And that might work for us, but
it might indeed. All right then. I agree with that, by the way, and I think it also suits us as what happened to everybody last season when they went to Red Star Belgrade, and it suddenly became a game. I think it suits us having Salzburg away last.
It's the
as
fact
long
that
as we win this one.
It also helps that we've got games 2, 3, and 5. They're 2, 4, and 5 as home games as well.
Very much so. Agree with all of that. Thank you very much indeed to Phil, to Paul, and to David. It has been the Anfield Wrap this week. First time we've had it with the Athletic in partnership. Very, very pleased to have them aboard. As discussed, loads and loads of stuff to come from that, and other matters arise. And there'll be the Weekender in terms of free shows this week. That'll be coming. We'll be having a chat about the Salzburg game and looking ahead to a massive, massive game against Leicester City. That's to come. You've got all the stuff that you can download, all the video, all the audio, all the YouTube. Just get on the app and go from there. It works that way best.